Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at Auztralia, the game of laying track and fighting Cthulhu and his minions. Jeez, what a concept. And a quick disclaimer that I was sent a review copy of this one, and also I have a playthrough going up at the same time with some expansions that are coming to Kickstarter soon. But this review is just going to focus on the core game. If you want to hear my thoughts on those expansions, check out the playthrough. For number 5, I'm going to start out with a mix which is focused on the cooperative play in the game. Now this is primarily, I think, a competitive and solo game. Co-op seems to have had the least development put into it. And that's kind of where the negative comes in for this mix. They didn't add any difficulty modifiers for co-op. They didn't put in objective cards like they have for solo to vary up the experience. But on the positive side, it still plays surprisingly well. And I think that's because the competitive game always had an element of limited co-op anyway, because you're all fighting the elder old ones and trying to take them down. So in the co-op, you can combine your fire to take down monsters, you can use each other's train tracks, give each other resources. It works really smoothly. I just wish there was a bit more there. My number 4 is also a mix, focusing on the old ones that in solo and co-op are your main opposition. And first of all, on the positive side, this is a really cool overall mechanic in that these face-down old one tiles are seated randomly at the beginning of the game and give you this real dread as you explore further and further inland that you'll get attacked by some monster. And when you get to about the halfway point of the game, they suddenly become active and start waking up these monsters and sending them against you. That all works really well. It's a fun opponent to strive against. But the negative side of this one comes in with the swinginess and balance of the AI. Now in the competitive game, if the old ones end up being weaker or stronger than normal, every player has to deal with that equally. It just kind of changes up the landscape of the game. But in solo and co-op, sometimes you just won't have the toughest monsters, or you'll have a lot of blank monsters, or you'll have a ton of terrible people, and it'll make the game way easier or way harder, so I wish they had found a way to make it more consistent when you weren't playing competitively. But let's start getting into the pros, starting with number 3. I really enjoy the rail laying in this game and how you build farms to gain both resources and victory points, but those farms then become beacons, targets for the monsters who will charge towards them, and you need to lay your track to be able to attack monsters and get to resources. It kind of combines some of the fun of a train delivery game with a sort of like state of siege survival game, and it's a blast both ways. And speaking of blast, let's get to my number 2, which is the combat system, also a pro for me. So first of all, I really like how streamlined this system is, because you don't have any units on the map. Instead, they just sit at your barracks, but wherever your rail reaches, they can get to basically instantaneously. But then when you get to the actual combat, it's a ton of fun, but there are no dice. Instead, you flip these cards, which are fine-tuned to have special matchups between the different unit types and enemy types, and you have this whole combined arms idea where it takes longer to go into combat with different unit types, but gives you a better chance of hitting more, and the enemies will consistently deal you damage and drive your troops insane, and you can pull out at any time and stop fighting, and the damage on the enemies will remain, so you get this delicious push-your-luck mechanic with tons of tension and low randomness. It's just great. And we're moving right along to my number 1, another pro, which is the core action system and time in the game. Auztralia uses a mechanic that I love, although you usually only see it in competitive games, and that's a time track, where each action you take will move you along the time track, and whoever is the furthest back takes the next action. And in solo and co-op, it works really nicely, especially in co-op, because you can balance who's taking what action, but eventually the old ones wake up and they start moving with you too. And you have to really carefully balance how far your actions will move you along, because the old one might get like 2 or 3 or 4 turns in a row to smash you if you overcommit. And then on top of that, they have this fun action system where you have these different action boxes, and whenever you take an action, you put a token there, and if you want to take that action again, you have to pay some gold. So the game kind of encourages you to spread out your actions and to spend time clearing out your cubes, but if you can save up enough gold, you can really hammer the same action multiple times. It's just a great action system overall, with consistently tough choices and great tension. I recommend this one to people who like train games, to people who like kind of state of siege or simple, straightforward war games. Now, where I will caution caution some gamers is in the fact that because this is a blend of so many mechanics, if you're a huge train game fan, or a huge war game fan, or like really heavy Euros, you might want to be careful of this one, because since it's trying to do all of them at once, it doesn't go too deeply on any of them, so if you want something heavier and more involved, this might not be enough for you. And hey, if you'd like to see the game in action, although as I mentioned, this is with the upcoming expansions coming soon to Kickstarter, click the link that just popped up. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.